Welcome back to the Foundation in C# course. We're currently in Module 9. In this lesson, we're going to be wiring up the Book a Room page. So this is where they've already chosen what room type they want, and now you want to allow them to actually make the booking. Okay? So let's look at your homework. The homework is to create a page that will allow the user to book a specific room type. Wire it up to the class library. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint here. We had a bug in the last lesson. We said, it's not a big deal. It's going to become a big deal now. So you're going to have to figure out how to address that bug. If you can't figure it out, then you might want to hard code the dates for now until you can watch how I do it. But at least give us a great effort, build the page out, try and get it to work, and wire it up to your class library. Okay? So there's your hint. Now go ahead and do the homework and pause the video right now. All right, so I assume that you are done and that you've got everything figured out. You got it, no big deal. You got it all done. Maybe not, but hopefully you gave it at least your best effort. So let's go to Visual Studio and I'll show you how to do it. The first thing is, let's look at that bug again, because this is going to become important when we move on to actually booking a room. So room search, if we chose the 15th and we said let's go to the 20th and said search, we have the MMDDYYYY in this box. And we figured, it's no big deal. We can see the room types. We're good. Until we go to book a room, and we need to know the start date and end date, which are now blank. That's not a good thing. So let's hit F12 to bring up our browser tools. In the browser tools, in the console, it says the specified value, I can make this a little bigger, the specified value of 12/15/2019 at 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds does not conform to the required format of year in 4 digits, dash, month in 2 digits, dash, day in 2 digits. So that's the format it's expecting, and instead it's getting back this format, and it doesn't like it. Now this seems to be a glitch or a problem connecting between HTML5, which is really what the front end is, and our C# code with that date. Because remember, C# doesn't have the concept of a date. It has a date time. So what we want to do is we want to be able to kind of transition between the two. We have this issue here where this is the format we're giving the date picker, and this is the format that it wants. So we have to match these two up. Well, the way to do that is when we send our date. So let's go back over to our room search. And right down here where we say, let's send our date, this date is in date time format. But when it comes into here, it's getting displayed directly on the page as that date time format, and that's a problem. But once it actually gets put into this date time variable, it's fine. The way I know it's fine is because that we've assigned date time now and date time now.add days to these dates, and it worked. It displayed the first time. So I just need to get the value into these properties, and then we'll be okay. Fortunately, we have a way of doing that. So let's come down here and let's do a quick action refactoring, and it won't allow me to wrap. Excellent. No big deal. We'll do it ourselves. So I'm going to wrap this on 3 lines. That way I have the ability to make some modifications to start date. Remember I said that we're going to pass start date in as both the property name and the value at once? Well, we're going to change that. Equals, so start date equals start date dot toString. And we're going to pass in a string. In what format? Well, YYYY dash 2 capital M's dash, if I can get the dash right, 2 cap or lowercase d's. That's the format that our picker is looking for. Let's copy that and say equals end date string.toString in that same format. So we're going to send this through the query string. Now, C# is smart enough to map this over to the correct dates and times, so we should be okay. And then from there, it'll get put into actual date time object. Ugly. We don't need to do that. Since we have the ID, I think what we can do is we can do a lookup. However, there's no code here to do a lookup. So we're going to actually add one method. And this is a very common thing to do when your planning isn't quite fully complete, and that's okay. You're just going to make some new plans or make a new adjustment to your plan and then add that through until the end. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But let's first start by laying this out. So we'll have the H2, and this is going to be room title. And then we'll have a paragraph, and this will be room description. Don't have anything yet, but that'll be where those go. And then we'll have a form. And the form is going to be very similar to what we have with the room search. So let's go over there. And we're going to grab our form and just copy it. So we have something to work from, essentially. And we'll paste it in here. And we're going to say we need to have a couple pieces of data. Well, we don't have those yet. So under, not room search, under book a room, we're going to have a property that's a first name. And by the way, this should be a bind property. Can't forget that. And we have a prop that's a string that is a last name. These are the pieces of data that we're going to ask for from the form. So they can be post only. So this will be first name, and then this will be last name. So those are two things we're going to ask for, and we're going to say book. And that's going to be our button that says, okay, go ahead and book this room. So that's what our page is going to look like, but we do need to have the ID of our type. So the room type. So prop int room type ID. And we're going to make that a bind property with a support get equals true. And the reason why is we're going to post this, or actually going to put this in our link. When we say book this room, we're going to have that go across the link. Also, we're going to want the start date and end date. This is the start date, and we want one more for the end date. And we'll make sure those also support the bind property and get. That way we can post them right across our link. So now we have three values to pass in. We have room type ID, start date, and end date. How do you wire up our page to pass those in? And let's also put a breakpoint here so that when we do call this, that we'll make sure we can verify these values do exist. So let's go over to our room search, and we have our anchor tag right here. Let's take out the href, and we're going to say that ASP-page, this is our page helpers, or our tag helpers. So ASP-page, and we're going to say we want to go to the page that is the slash book room. And that's the book room page, but then you have some parameters. So ASP dash route dash, and we have the option of putting in our ID. So date equals at model.end date. And that should work to pass all three values across. We're going to make sure it does by running this. We have our breakpoint in already. We can verify it does send those parameters across. So let's go over to our web page, go to our room search. We're going to say between the 10th and the 15th, which gives us two room types, I believe. Yep, king size and queen size. Let's book this now. And we hit our breakpoint. And let's look at our this value. End date is 12/15/2019 at midnight. And our start date is 12/10 at midnight. And our room type ID is 2. So let's pass all three of those values across. How did it do that? Well, the way it did it was when we built this, we used a tag helper called ASP-route dash. And this tag helper allows you to put in whatever the parameter name is. In this case, the parameter name is start date, this one is end date, and this one is room type ID. And no casing doesn't matter for URLs. And so what's going to happen is it's going to use these parameters and then pass them in, which since over here we have supports get equals true, it's going to read that parameter in and store the value, and do that for all three of these. Now it is passing in the full date and time. We could do some trimming on this to make it look prettier. So we could do a toString or short date string, like so. I think that might be nice to have because then our URL is not a mess. Because notice before our URL had colons in it, which had to be escaped, and it had times that were all zeros. So let's change this to 10 and 15 and see what our URL looks like. And now our URL is a lot cleaner. It has a start date of 12:10 and an end date of 12:15. If we hit this link right here, we now hit our breakpoint, and we still populate our dates properly. We have our room type, which is now 3, and we have our start date as well. So that all populates the same. It's just our URL is a little prettier that way. So I kind of like doing it that way and making a pretty URL. So now we have our ID, we have we have our start date, we have our end date. We have a form that should give us our first name and last name. Let's create a public action result on post. And really what we'll do is we will return redirect to page, and we'll redirect to the index. And a start date of 12/9. Everything there looks like it is valid and set up. So we do have a couple of things to look at. First of all, why didn't it have a label for my first name? That's interesting because it should, but for some reason that page doesn't. And then second, how we populate the title and description. Actually, now that I think about the label for, I think it's not even displaying the labels. Let's run it again. It might not be displaying the labels even for the room search. Yep, it's not displaying those either. Not sure why. So let's go to F12, and we will do this little icon right here. Select an element on the page. Select this right here, and we do have a label for start date, and then we have our input. And so it looks like it's actually wrapping our input inside of our label, which I don't think is correct. Let's go back over here. I think the issue is the self-closing right here. So let's make sure we change these over. The weird thing about HTML is sometimes you can have self-closing, sometimes you can't. So let's do the same thing for our search page. So up here, we'll do put the close for our label. I think it's wrapping the whole thing, and that's the problem. Let's run this again and see if that makes a difference. And look at that, start date does, but we have a problem over here with our label, and I'm not sure. Oh, goodness. I guess Tim put it in the wrong spot. You need to yell at me louder if I do that. I can't hear unless you yell really loud. All right, so that was a joke, by the way. Don't yell at your computer. Okay, start date and end date. That looks better. So now we do a search, we find something, we book it, and first name and last name show up as well. Woohoo! We actually have something a little closer to what we expected. But now we still need to have the title and description and actually do something when we book a room. So let's start by getting the information we need about a room type. So over here, let's start at the very beginning in our database. We have DBO store procedures. We don't have one that is room types get by ID. So let's go to store procedure, and we're going to say this is SP room types underscore get by ID. This is a pretty straightforward one. We're going to say ID is an int, and we'll have a begin, an end, a set no count on, and then a select, we'll select star for now, from dbo.room types where ID equals at ID. By ID. Int ID. And we're going to get back that room type model. Well, how do we do that? Return underscore db dot load data of room type model in dynamic. And we're going to pass in the name, which is dbo.sp room types underscore get by ID. The parameters, new, and we're going to pass in ID equals ID. And actually, I believe for everything else, we're doing lowercase for the first letter. That was my bad. So for example, over here, lowercase is the first letter. That is true. So let's update the database. So I'll publish again. And that was published. That's really quick. And now we don't even have to do this. We can just pass in the ID itself. These little details matter. And connection string is connection string name, and is store procedure is true. Let's go ahead and do our refactor on this. Let's scroll up a little bit. This is just right at the bottom of the page. Refactor, let's wrap long arguments and align them, wrap every argument like so. There we go. And now at the end of this, we're going to say first. Okay, so we can actually say first or default. I kind of like that better because that way it's going to return a null if it doesn't find it, which might be a little more obvious. So get room type by ID. Guess what? That's not in our interface. Well, we can right click and say quick actions. We can say get or pull get room type by ID up into iDatabase data. Click that. It's going to add this signature into our interface. Now that we're done there, we can come back over here and in our onGet, if the room type ID is greater than 0, making sure we actually have a room type, let's create a property for this. And this is going to be of what type? It's the room type model. And the property name will be room type is fine. Control dot here to add our which means that on my page, instead of saying room title, I can say at model dot, and this is room type dot title. And then down here, I can say at model dot room type dot description. And that should load my title and description for me. Let's just verify this is working as well. So I'm going to run this. It's going to load up. Quick room search. Standard dates are fine. Search. Found a king size bed. Sounds good. A king size bed. A room with a king size bed in the window. First name and last name. Now hit book. Which means that all we need to do now is actually wire up this. What do you do when you hit book? Well, we already have our underscore DB, so we can say book guest, where we pass in our first name, last name, start date, end date, and room type ID. That's it. Then return redirect to page index. So let's do this. Let's book a room. Let's book the executive suite. Joe Smith. No, you know what? I say Timothy Corey, because it should find the same Timothy Corey. And say book. Cool. We can close this out. Close out. Go back over to SQL Server Object Explorer. View data. And now, same person has booked room ID, the room ID of 2. And that's from 12/12 to 12/19. They have not yet checked in. The total price was $700 because it's for 7 nights. All right, so there is our completed page for actually creating bookings. So come on back to the next lesson where we'll talk about what we've learned so far in our Razor Pages application and where we go from here.